So this is 1.7 part 2. So non-linear inequalities just means that they're going to have x squared versus part 1 was just x. So here we'll most likely have 2 answers for our inequalities. Our inequalities, just as a reminder, are greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, greater than or less than. And then when we put them on a number line, if it's greater than or equal to or less than or equal to, it's going to have a closed circle at those points. And then if it's greater than or less than without the equal to part, it'll be an open circle at the points. The next slide talks about the steps to solve nonlinear inequalities. First thing we want to do is move all the terms to one side. And then our favorite thing to do after that is to factor. After we factor, we're going to find our 2 answers, or 2 numbers. And then we need to find the intervals. So we're going to put it on a number line and figure out if we're talking about in between the 2 points or outside the 2 points. And then from there, we need to write our interval notation. So let's look at number 3, example 3, number 1. What did we say step 1 is? Move all the terms to one side. So I'm going to subtract 5x and add 6. I'm going to move them over to the left side just because I like it when my leading coefficient is positive. So I'm going to keep the x squared where it's at and move everything to that side. So I have x squared minus 5x plus 6 is less than or equal to 0. From here, we factor. What are 2 factors of 6 that add to negative 5?
3 and
negative 3 and negative 2. Perfect. So we have x minus 3 and x minus 2 is less than or equal to 0. From here, we're just going to set each piece. We can say equal to 0 for now, and we'll figure out the inequality part at the end. So I have x minus 3 is equal to 0, and x minus 2 is equal to 0. So x is equal to 3, and x is equal to 2. So I'm going to put those 2 points on my number line. Always start with the smallest one, so I have 2 and 3. At 2 and 3, am I going to have an open circle or closed circle? What's my inequality in the question? Less than or equal to. Does that mean an open circle or closed circle? Closed circle. I'm going to fill in our circle. So now we either need to figure out if we're going to shade in between these 2 points or outside the 2 points. And to figure that out, we just have to plug in numbers into our original inequality to check. So let's plug in a number to the left that's smaller than 2. What's a number smaller than 2? What's an even easier number to work with that's smaller than 2? 0. Let's plug in 0. You can plug in 1. That's totally fine. 1 is easy enough to work with, but 0 is just nice to plug in. So you have 0 squared is less than or equal to 5 times 0 minus 6. So 0 is less than or equal to negative 6. Is this true? Is 0 less than negative 6?
No.
No. So I'm not shading outside on the left here. Let's plug in a number in between 2 and 3. What's a number in between 2 and 3?
Wait, what?
What's a number in between 2 and 3?
2.5.
2.5. We'll say 2.5. So 2.5 squared is less than or equal to 5 times 2.5 minus 6. Well, let's work it out. 2.5 squared would be 6.25, which is less than or equal to 5 times 2.5 is 12.5 minus 6. So this would be 6.25 is less than or equal to 6.5. Is this true? 6.25 less than 6.5? Yes. So we're going to shade in between since it works. You can also plug in another number outside 3, so something greater than 3 to see if that works. But since in between works, it's not going to be in between and one part of outside, so the outside part's not going to work either. So this is our number line. This is what it asks when it says to graph it. Next part, we have to write our interval notation. So for interval notation, we're just talking about the highlighted part because all the values in between 2 and 3 work for our inequality of 3. So we're talking about all the values between 2 and 3. Would 2 get a bracket or parentheses? Because it's less than or equal to, the equal to part means that it gets brackets there because it's a closed circle, brackets. If it was an open circle, that would be parentheses. If it is a closed circle, it gets brackets. Last part is we are going to write our inequality. So x is in between 2 and 3. So we'd say 2 is less than or equal to x, which is less than or equal to 3. So we have 3 parts of our answer here. We have our number line, bless you, our interval notation, and the inequality. I think WebAssign only asks for the number line and the interval notation, so the first 2 parts. But you need to know how to write the inequality too. All right, let's do it again. Number 4. What's the first thing I should do for number 4? Move 1 to the other side. So we have 2x squared minus x minus 1 is greater than 0. All right, George, what do I do to factor this?
Okay, so first, you move the 1 over. Oh, wait.
Sure did that.
What?
Sure did that.
So we multiply the first times the last. So we get negative 2. What are 2 factors of negative 2 that add to negative 1?
Negative 2 and 1.
Negative 2 and 1. So here we have x minus 2, and x plus 1 is greater than 0. What do I do next?
Just make it equal to 0.
Before I make it equal to 0, what do I need to do? If I start with multiplying, what do I have to remember? Divide. We need to divide by 2. So we get x minus 1 and 2x plus 1. Now we want to set them both equal to 0. We can kind of ignore our inequality for now because we're going to worry about that once we plug them into our number line. We can figure out what exactly our inequality needs to be. So we have x minus 1 is equal to 0 and 2x plus 1 is equal to 0. So x is equal to 1 and x is equal to negative 1/2. So let's put those on a number line. We have negative 1/2 and 1. Let's plug in a number that's smaller than negative 1/2. What's smaller than negative 1/2? So let's plug in negative 1. So I'm going to do that on the side over here. We have 2 times negative 1 squared minus negative 1 is greater than 1. So 2 times 1 plus 1 is greater than 1 is 3 greater than 1. Yes. So I'm going to shade outside. And I almost forgot, at negative 1/2, is it going to be an open circle or closed circle? Open circle, because it's a greater than sign. So we put an open circle. Now let's plug in a number in between, see if that works, just to be super sure. What's a number in between negative 1/2 and 1? 0. So let's plug in 0. We have 2 times 0 squared minus 0 is greater than 1. So 0 is greater than 1. Is that true? No, doesn't work. So in between doesn't work. Let's plug in another number outside just to be super sure. Let's plug in 2. So we have 2 times 2 squared minus 2 is greater than 0. So it'd be 8 minus 2 is greater than 0. Is 6 greater than 0? Is 6 greater than 0? Yes. So we highlight outside of our 2 points. You're either going to highlight both the outsides or in between. It's either going to be in between or outside. So here we have the outsides. Now we write our answer in interval notation. What does the arrow to the left point to? Awesome, negative infinity, because it's going in the negative direction. So when we write interval notation, which we talked about this yesterday in the video that you all watched, we start with the smallest number and then go to the largest. So our smallest number here would be negative infinity. Infinity always gets parentheses. And then that red part of our graph ends at negative 1/2. Because it's an open circle, we put parentheses there. We have a gap in our graph, so I have to do this part on the left first. We put a union in the middle, a U, to connect the next part. What value does my graph start up again at? 1. So it goes from 1, and then it points in the right direction. So what does our graph go to? Infinity. So this would be our interval notation. If you highlight the outside parts of your graph, you're going to have 2 intervals because there's 2 sections to your graph. Just like how you have 2 intervals, you're going to have 2 inequalities. So we would say x is less than negative 1/2 and x is greater than 1.